I'd walk on the left side of the street with my t-shirt saying, "Hi, I'm Amy's dad."
Democratic Visions is handmade by volunteers for the entire metro region by DFL Senate District 42. Here's host Tim O'Brien.
I'm absolutely delighted to welcome to our program tonight the always iconic and oft-times irreverent Minnesota journalist Jim Klobuchar. Jim, welcome to the program.
Well, Tim, my pleasure. What is this irreverent? My pastor at church is going to be offended here.
We got much to talk about, Jim, but let me add some perspective. I want to talk a little bit about your background. Jim Klobuchar has worked for the Associated Press and has produced a widely read column for 3 decades at the Star Tribune. Jim has authored 23 books and is an outdoor adventurer and a tour guide. Jim's favorite U.S. Senator is our own Amy Klobuchar. The two of them make up the best father-daughter team in politics. Jim, how does that work?
Well, I'm not sure it worked all the time in our campaigns together when the parades that go with campaigning. Parades are fun, and even political parades can be a lot of fun. And I'd walk on the left side of the street with my t-shirt saying, "Hi, I'm Amy's dad," that sort of thing. And Amy'd walk on the right side, and she would greet people, and I would greet people. And once in a while, I would get into a battle of words with people who weren't all Democrats, of course, not all of whom approved the columns I wrote, that sort of thing.
You wouldn't stand up for Amy, would you?
Well, what happened, so we'd come back to the center of the street after going 2 or 3 blocks this way, and Amy would be waving the crowd. I walked with her, and she would say, "Dad," she said, "why don't you let me do the politics? You just stay out of arguments."
That's very funny. Well, I remember back, Jim, when Amy first ran for Hennepin County Attorney, and I was walking in a parade, and I was just holding some sort of banner for Amy, and I do recall specifically you in that parade, and you weren't walking. You were sprinting from side to side, so you must have been assigned both the left and the right in the course of that parade.
Well, they assumed I was ambidextrous.
With the loud Republican racket this summer, you might have missed some local happenings. Senator Klobuchar sent her dad with greetings to Eden Prairie and Minnetonka DFLers at their summer golf event. President Barack Obama made 2 visits to Minnesota, and Governor Dayton and DFL leaders are also in high gear. Candidates for school board and city councils are again planting lawn signs. Jim, you know as well as I do that politics is truly local. Do you take on the nitty-gritty things like lawn signs and door knocking for Amy?
Yes, of course.
Wouldn't it be a case if somebody with your stature came up and knocked on the door that you'd take 10 minutes before you'd be able to pull yourself away to go to the next house?
There's a little story about knocking on doors.
Yeah, what's that?
Well, I knocked on the door in Edina once. I introduced myself, and the lady said, "Oh," she said, "I love the columns your father used to write."
That must have made you feel pretty good.
I did. But sure, getting acquainted with people, you don't really have a chance to do any extended lectioneering and talking about the candidate's stand on this and how she bailed out people from this and that, and leave some material if they'd like, and ask them if there is something in the campaign, something before the public that she would like to talk about that I might be able to help with on Amy's position, that sort of thing.
But isn't it true, Jim, that you make appearances on behalf of Amy? Because she can't be in all places at all times. So
no,
don't you go around the state
yes, especially in campaign season. Yeah. I mean, and now we're approaching that. We're still a little distance from there. But we're not a twosome. Amy is very much her own person. You must know that. And I help where I can. I've traveled a lot over the years as a columnist. I know many of these smaller towns, especially. I've taken my bike rides to many of them. I've spoken in many of them. I know a lot of the folks in the smaller towns, and we talk politics. Some of these are not Democratic meetings, they're civic meetings, where partisan politics really isn't proper, and so I'll just extend greetings. But yeah, she's done in 5 years now in the Senate, I think, things of which Minnesotans have a right to be proud.
I want to talk about Amy's stature in Washington and why she has been such a successful senator. What's your take on that?
Well, I think there are several qualities she brings to the Senate that not only her public, or the senators. These are folks, I think, who like her style, and I think I might illustrate it this way. She will, for all of the turmoil of the last 2 years and the standoff between the parties in the Senate, the invocation of filibuster against legislation that should have passed, there is still some time and some room for a certain amount of civility. It's certainly something the Senate lacks today. But she'll do something like this. She has a bill, let's say, that isn't wildly partisan in either direction. Let's say consumer protection, something most people of civility and intelligence can agree on. And she will go to a senator on the other side of the aisle.
A Republican.
Yes, somebody like Johnny Isakson of Georgia, and say, hey, this bill, I think you'll agree with its purposes. Your name would look awfully good on this bill. And I think it would look good in Georgia. Something like that. Yeah. In other words, people, no matter how fast they are, how steadfast they are in a political point of view, or how driven they are, and it will still respond to that kind of approach. And I think it's one reason she's relatively popular on the Republican side. She's, of course, a moderate, essentially, as a politician.
Well, she's a person.
Yeah.
And she's civil, and she's got a devastating sense of humor. Now, you take those three attributes, you've got a pretty good person.
Yeah. One of the things that I find most delightful about her is whether she's on the campaign trail or in the Senate making a speech or whatever, she's got a capacity for the parts of life that are ironic, that are somewhat crazy, the absurdities of life. And she sees that, and she'll bring it up spontaneously in a campaign speech, wherever she is, in a group of elders. She enjoys a good joke, as long as it's not at somebody's expense. Right. And she does it. It's natural with her. She gets as much from her mother as she would from her father, I think. And the joy of life. She's a kind of campaigner not far from the image that Hubert Humphrey had, the happy warrior, in other words.
Which accomplishment are you proudest of in her first term of, I should say, many?
Her early realization when she was the only senator from Minnesota, when the other seat hadn't been filled yet, that the most important part of her tenure in the Senate was the constituency she has, 5 million people in a place called Minnesota. The state matters to her, truly. And some of her biggest achievements have had nothing to do with direct legislation. It's hard to get a bill through the American Senate today with the filibuster rule being in, and with the Republican commitment to defeat Obama in 2008. And in fact, this is an opportunity. They have it this year with tons of money behind them, not only to defeat the Democrats, but virtually destroy the Democratic Party as a meaningful.
I want to talk about
and
that.
That's the goal. They have the money now in pocket. Well, and
Citizens United, probably one of the worst Supreme Court decisions that's been issued in my lifetime, for sure.
I grew up in the Depression on the Iron Range. We didn't have much. We had a guy in the White House who seemed to know where we were going. And we took care of each other. We were together. There are other Republicans in the Iron Range. They weren't all Democrats. We took care of each other. We listened to this guy on our Philco radios, and we have a belief in what this guy was saying. And today, when I look at America, I look at the progression of America. When I was a child growing up, we didn't have much money, but we weren't hungry. We took care of ourselves. We built each other's homes. And now along came World War II, which helped bail us out of the Depression. And long after World War II came the great American middle class. And America was unstoppable in the world. It was respected in the world. It took care of its citizens. It uplifted the lives of millions of poor and gave them self-respect. And I look at America today and say, where are we going? And the destruction of this middle class is not accidental. And when I see the enormous bonuses being given to bankers and being given to Wall Street, floormen, millionaires, all of them, and I look at the growing unemployment figures, our jobs being peddled to the rest of the world, and we're trying to get some traction, something in the way of employment, to get some of these people back, some money into the way Eisenhower did it, the consummate Republican. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to do it in the same way and asking the other guys, hey, isn't this the way to go? Put people back to work so they can have respect again, so they can give their kids a fair education. And we don't have the money now to give the kids a kind of education I had 80 years ago, 75 years ago.
Jim, what can we do? I mean, average
we
citizens.
Can make the public aware of it, and I'm not sure how we're going to do it in the way the media is set up.
But aren't
today.
we going to just get swallowed by money? I mean, is it going to have to be?
No. I think the key is to get boots on the ground again. All those people who voted for Obama, when we see the end of the campaign between Romney and the guy from Texas, Perry, when we see the excesses of it and a lot of the lying that is going to go on in it, mm-hmm. I think we're going to find those people who are dissatisfied with Obama now because he couldn't get the legislation he hoped he could. How could he with the filibuster? It was impossible. I think the American people who are dissatisfied with the Obama presidency have to look at that and say, what else could he do? Yes, there are times when he could have been stronger, of course. You can apply that to any politician. Well, Amy and the rest of the Democrats are with him on this. I'm not pessimistic about November of next year.
There's no doubt in my mind with Senator Klobuchar and President Obama at the top of the ticket. Minnesota is going to continue to go Democrat. I think we're going to throw the scoundrels out over in St. Paul that have been fighting to protect the very, very rich.
I think the Democrats have to remember, look, this guy hasn't given us what we didn't even give us what we wanted in the health plan, all of it. Mm-hmm. But Social Security is under fire in this election in a very literal way, and there are millions of Americans whose lives are directly tied in with that campaign. The guy from Texas, Perry, calls Social Security, which has saved the lives and made lives livable for millions of people who worked honestly, calls this a Ponzi scheme.
It's an abomination.
Well, we've got to be strong, and we've got to go to those caucuses, and we've got to rap on doors, and we have to make sure every able-bodied person in each precinct votes.
Thanks for being such a vigorous and assertive spokesperson on behalf of the state of Minnesota and your daughter. Please come back and see us again. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Tim, for what you do.
Democratic Visions is handmade by volunteers for DFL Senate District 42, Lori Pryor, Chair. Democratic Visions can also be seen on YouTube and at dflsd42.org.